Hi class, this is Professor Julian. I'll be doing these videos at the end of every week and going into the next week just to kind of go recap what was talked about and as well as talk about what the upcoming week will be about. So glad that everyone introduced themselves as well as um, completed their first discussion post, and I was really impressed with what everyone was discussing, and we had a lot of good back and forth discussions about the first week. And I want to encourage you guys to keep doing that because I sometimes notice that as the semester goes on, it kind of drops off. So really good start from everyone. So I want to certainly encourage you guys to keep on you know uh, talking about the different aspects of the course. Certainly read other people's posts before you post yours, so we don't have too many people talking about the same the same topic. So this first video, I'll do two videos. The first one just kind of recap some of the things that we talked about. I will be using Adobe Creative Cloud, so if you have a later version of Adobe, some things may be different. So the first week, we really just kind of went over some of the real basics of the interface. As when you create a new document in Photoshop, you notice that you can have a lot of different dimensions. A first project you'll be using inches, but your final project you'll be using pixels. So a lot of the times you may be using one or the other. Certainly if you're doing a print project, inches will probably be better. If you're doing something with the web, you certainly want to use pixels. So if you want to start off with, we'll just start off with inches, 8.5 by 11. And remember that, your resolution, 300 being the standard for a high resolution image, 72 for a web image. RGB, I would like you guys to work in RGB when we're doing image editing because you're looking at a screen, so you really want to edit on screen, so you want to use RGB color. You can use either white background or transparent. It really doesn't matter too much at this point. Certainly if you're using a designing a web page, the better option will be transparent background because you want the images to have no edges, right? Transparent edges. So if you create that page, your toolbox is right here. Certainly you've gone through a lot of different windows using your workspace, essential workspaces. Some of the most common areas will be your layers panel. Make sure that you're saving your files in Creative Cloud. If that asterisk is there, it means you haven't saved your file. So you certainly want to go save as. And remember we have, uh, let's see, anything. So create folders. That's going to make your life easier. Remember in Photoshop, you're going to be using the Photoshop .psd is a native file. That's the one you want to create, and you'll be asked to, save things out of different formats. So we know that .psd is going to give you the best option for all your layers and everything. Certainly, if you're saving something out, you can save it as a JPEG. You can also save as a PNG. And I'll show you a little bit later how you can export these files separately as well. So if you just wanted to save this as, let's just call it week1.pst, and then you know your file is saved when this little asterisk is here. So some of the other things we talked about is pixels versus vector. So one will show you. So I have a file open already. So we know if we enlarge an image in Photoshop, we're looking at pixels. So these dots, and if you really go up close, you can see everything is made up of these little squares, and they're positioned in such a way when you look at it from a distance, it looks like a continuous tone image. It looks perfect and smooth. But we know as we enlarge that image, we will see. I'm just zooming in, but if you want to enlarge that image, remove the background and enlarge it, we know we will start getting what we call pixelation or distortion of that image. So you cannot just enlarge the image as much as you want because you start losing quality. So for instance, if I'm an illustrator, it's the same image, but let's say I had a vector square. So if you don't have Illustrator, there's no need to have it, but if you just to show you, and you have a square, and I can enlarge this square, 500%, 560%, and you will see no loss around that square. Now, if I did the same thing in Photoshop, it's going to hide that, and I'm going to create a shape here. And I'm going to fill that shape with a color. Okay, and I'd use the transform tool, which is Command T, okay, or Control T on the Windows, or you can go to Edit, Free Transform, or Transform. You can scale it. If I start scaling this image, I'm not even going to go 500%. But you'll notice that even though you'll still be able to see as you get larger, it's still made up of pixels. Even though the edges are pretty sharp, the image itself is still made up of pixels. Whereas in Illustrator, you're never going to see any pixels. There are no pixels. They're all lines and mathematical points. Now, in Illustrator, if you were to put an image in Illustrator and enlarge it, you will see pixelation because an image has to be made up of pixels, a continuous tone image. So some of the other things we talked about in week 1, I talked about file formats. Your layers panel, every time you include a new image, you want to create on a layer. Because what will happen is if you were to have an image and you were to create a shape on top of that image, so let's say you use the paintbrush and you were to go on this image and start a drawing, well, it's not part of the image. So if you were to move that image on this layer, it's all together. You kind of messed up, your image. But if you wanted to create that shape, you could have created it on, I'll go back into my history. The history panel will allow you to go back in time because Photoshop doesn't have unlimited undo. So you can't go, undo, undo, undo like you can do. You can only really do one undo and then it's kind of grayed out. So if I want to go back to the beginning, I can, go back to the beginning on the history panel. Let's say I wanted to go back where before I did that brush, create a new layer, and then take the brush tool and then create that, that shape. My bottom image, I can hide that and my bottom image won't be affected. So layers are very important in Photoshop to make sure that you are creating things on different layers. In the coming weeks, you'll be doing a lot of what's called masking, and you'll be asked to create separate layers to remove things out of the background and things like that. So it's important to remember your layers panel, and you can hide and show different things. So you can try different things out, and if you don't like it, then you can hide it, and it won't print, or it won't. If you create a JPEG, excuse me, of this image or PDF or something, you won't have these layers won't show in the final final image. So you can and also when in Photoshop, the layers don't affect the size of your file. So if you were to hide these two, the file will be bigger, but the export won't export the contents of these layers. So you don't have to worry about if you have 4 or 5 layers with really big graphics and you export a JPEG or save as JPEG, these layers won't affect your final file size. And for those of you digital web majors, file size is super critical when you're exporting files, for the web, right? Because we want to have the most optimal, smallest file, so file size does make a difference. So as you save different things, this was originally a JPEG. If I save, so I'm going to just import. Sorry, I'm just going to import. So a couple of different ways you can import things into Photoshop. Certainly, you can go and you can place a file, going on the file place. If you place linked, you have to have the file with you in the same folder. If you place embedded, it's going to actually kind of embed the file into your document. So that means if you were to move this file somewhere or share the file with someone else, if it's embedded, the file will stay with you. If you link it, you have to actually copy these two images. So let's say I wanted to bring these two images in. If you were to file place it, you can only do one at a time. So I can place it like that, and it goes right in, full size. The other way you can do it is I can actually go on the desktop and drag that file. A couple different things would happen So I'm going to go back in the history just so I can show you. So a couple different things. If you have to drag the image in, places it right in. But I could also do two images at once if I could drag it in. So I can select these two, shift select, drag it into the file, and you just hit return. The second one comes, hit return again. So sometimes with your workflow, it's easier to just to go on the desktop and drag something in manually. So that's, and you can tell it was a place embedded file in here. Notice I can't do anything if I'm on my desktop. So I have to actually go to that image with a pointer tool if I want to move it around. Okay. A quick little tip in Photoshop is if you have multiple things on the screen at the same time and you want to select something, obviously you can click on the layer. But if let's say I was on this layer, but I want to select the layer at the bottom, I could actually click Control and click, and what it'll do is we'll select everything that's on top of each other. So I can go select, no, I didn't name these. Let me name this a girl, and I'll name this symbols. So I name my layers. As I start getting 5, 6, 7, 20 layers, you certainly want to name all your layers. So let's say I was on the girl layer, but I want to get to that symbols layer. I can just hold the control key down, and click, or mouse right click on the Windows, and it'll give me all the options. So the three options are girl, symbols, and background. So if I select background, it automatically jumps to the background. If I select symbols, it automatically jumps to symbols. So that's really useful when you have lots of layers. Instead of going back and forth in the layers panel, you can just, right click symbols, and then you can move it. Now, if you want to move one in front, you have to actually drag it above to get it in front. If I want to move, and if this is locked, all you have to do is just click it once, and now the layer is unlocked. I can still call it background, except now I can move it around. Another little trick is the align tools. If you want to, let's say, align two things together, you can select two layers, and you can click this align tool. So if let's say this one is over here, and you want to align them, I'm going to move this one up, and you want to align them exact, just select the two layers and select this tool, the align tool center, and it will center them. Now notice how it went sort of off, but they're both centered together. You can move them in. You can also select the background with these two, and because the background was locked in, it's going to move it in. So now the background layer is aligned with the two layers on top. So in the next video, I'll kind of go over what you'll be discussing next week, throughout the week, and so this is sort of the real basics. And in Photoshop, there's so many things to learn, so many tools to go through. Again, just go in, practice. Don't worry about breaking anything. None of these things can harm you. All you can do is learn. Try different things. Get your images from those free image sites. For those of you who are into the photography, or you could just, use your phones if your phones have good resolution. Bring images in. You can certainly use them. Try all the different tools, especially with photo retouching, which we'll be doing next week. I'll go over a few of those. But it's a fun program, and hopefully you guys made a great start to week 1. Want to make sure that everybody is on point. If you have any questions, please post them to the discussion boards. Make sure you check the discussions for your actual readings. I know there was some confusion on our part, on my part, with what was going on in the content section, but in the discussion section, all the readings should be up to date and clear. So look out for video number 2 of what we'll be doing next week. Over and out.